We're getting ready to start talking about ethical theories, but before we do, we need to lay some really important groundwork and talk about metaethics. Instead of asking, is stealing wrong? Metaethics asks about the statement, stealing is wrong itself. It's asking about the status of morality. If you've ever heard of like moral relativism or moral subjectivism, that's the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about in this module. So let's get into it. Our goals for this module, just like any module, is to understand what the views are, understand what the arguments for and against these views are, and be able to sort of compare and contrast them, see what they have going for them, see what problems they have. And so we're going to be talking about moral realism, moral subjectivism, moral relativism, and moral nihilism within this module. We'll also be talking about a very famous Scottish philosopher named David Hume and his arguments against the objectivity of morality. And we're going to be looking at a philosopher named J.L. Mackie and his so-called argument from queerness that tries to argue against moral realism, even against moral anti-realism, and for this kind of moral error theory. It's a really, really interesting argument, and some of you guys might find it appealing. So, just to sort of get terminology out of the way, most of the time in this course is actually going to be spent here in normative ethics. This is where the real sort of like hard work of ethics takes place. This is where you develop ethical theories and sort of test them. That's what we're going to start getting into in the next module. We just came from here, from applied ethics, when we talked about the permissibility of abortion. That's when you take ethical principles and try to apply them to, real world scenarios. Right now, we're over here in metaethics. And this is a very abstract field of study. And it can be kind of hard to get your head around even like what the question that we're asking is. So I want to make sure that we understand that before we start to get into these different views. So the question that metaethics is asking, it's not asking whether stealing is wrong. That is not the question here. Instead, it's asking about the status of this statement itself. Stealing is wrong. That's a moral claim, right? It's asking, does that statement even have a truth value? Like, is it even the kind of thing that can be true or false? And if it is, what makes it true? What makes it false? Is it just like our opinions about it? Is it some like fact about the world? This is what metaethics is asking. This is the question that we're after. It's a really, really interesting question, but it can be a little bit tricky to sort of deal with. Now, the views that we're going to be looking at, we're going to be looking at a total of 5 different views in 3 different categories. You might see these categorized slightly differently by different philosophers, and that's okay. It sort of depends on, what you're after, what it is you're trying to do. I'm just trying to group these together, these different views in meaningful ways. Moral realism or moral objectivism, we're going to use those terms synonymously, is just the idea that moral statements, moral claims are just like other claims. They're either like true or false, right? And it doesn't depend on what people think about them. Moral anti-realism, they are going to be true or false, but only relative to something, either an individual or a culture, depending on what the view is. And then we've got moral nihilism. Now, this is always kind of like a source of confusion because a lot of students have heard the term nihilism. Nihilism in philosophy is just like, you can have it about all kinds of things. You can be a nihilist about like anything. All nihilism is here's what nihilism is. It's the view that says that thing that you think is a thing isn't really a thing, right? Like, it's just not a thing. That's what a nihilist view kind of is. So you can be like a nihilist about value, you can be a nihilist about like all kinds of metaphysical claims, and in this case, this is a nihilist about ethical claims. And so what they're saying is ethical statements cannot be true. That's what these two views are going to have in common that we're going to talk about here. So we've got one realist view, which is just objectivism, two anti-realist views, and two nihilistic views that we're going to talk about. And we'll spend some time unpacking each of these. You'll need to know, again, what are the arguments for and against each of these views. We want to hit this really hard because I have a lot of students who would call themselves moral relativists, because they think that morality depends on the situation, and that's not what moral relativism is. So I want to clear up misconceptions about moral relativism. We'll need to talk about Hume's arguments against the objectivity of moral truth, and also what's called his is-ought fallacy or guillotine. And then what we're going to end up having to do, though, is from this point on in the course, assume the truth of moral objectivism, because otherwise, doing moral theorizing doesn't really make any sense. So we'll need to talk about why that assumption is an important one to kind of make for this for the rest of the course. One thing I want to do, though, I kind of give this talk in a lot of my classes. I think it's an important thing to sort of hit here. At some point in school, you learned the difference between a fact and an opinion. And you were told at the time that, well, what a fact is some provable or demonstrable truth about the world. And that opinions are just oh, that's just something you believe. This distinction isn't quite right, and it's not super helpful, especially for what we're going to be doing in this module in particular. First off, not all facts are provable, right? Either aliens exist somewhere in the universe or they don't, right? One of those two statements is factually true. Aliens exist or we are alone in the universe. One of those two statements is true. We don't know. We definitely can't prove it. We may never know, right? But one of those statements is going to be a fact. Faster than light travel is possible. Is it? I don't know, but it either is possible and that's a fact, or it's not possible and that's a fact. So all a fact is just a true statement in this context. And then if an opinion is just something you believe, well, okay, I believe that Earth is round. Does that make it merely my opinion? Well, no, right? It's also a fact. And this is why I kind of push back against this dichotomy of fact versus opinion. I push back a little bit harder in my critical thinking courses, because you don't want somebody to be able to get away with saying something really heinous or obviously false, and then just being oh, well, that's just my opinion, bro. No, the content of your opinion is factually incorrect and factually heinous or whatever. So what we instead need to talk about, I think a better way to sort of cash this out, everything is a fact. It's either just going to be objective facts or subjective facts. Objective facts are mind independent. It doesn't matter what somebody thinks or believes about the claim. It's either true or it's false, and it doesn't matter what you think about it, right? So, Paris is the capital of France. If you think it's Versailles, you're just wrong, right? It used to be, now it's not. I don't know. Subjective facts depend on a mind. They are facts about our inner subjectivities, our inner preferences. So for me, for example, when I say I don't like mushrooms, I am making a true statement. But notice, that statement is not about mushrooms. It's about me and my preferences. That's what that fact is about. So I'm not giving you a fact about mushrooms, right? I'm not telling you, oh, they're a fungus that grows in poop, which they are. But, I'm just telling you a fact about me and my preferences. And, the fact that they are a fungus that grows in poop might filter into that just a little bit. I don't know. So, objective and subjective truths. This will become really, really important when we start talking about these different metaethical views. So I've got some examples here Squirrels are mammals, objectively true. If you think they're reptiles, you are objectively wrong, right? That's just, they are just not. And it doesn't matter like what your opinion is or what your, inner preferences are or what you need or want or believe or think. Squirrels are cute. I think they're cute. I think they're super cute. So for me, that is a true statement. Squirrels are scary. I guess if they can get a little bit aggressive around here, but like in general, no, that's just not true for me. I don't find them all that scary. Unless they're like hiding in the trash can and then you go to throw something away and they pop out and you're like, ah. But objectively true that squirrels are mammals. Objectively false that they are reptiles. Subjectively true for me, at least, that squirrels are cute. And subjectively false for me that squirrels are scary. Notice these two things are not like facts about squirrels. They're facts about my like cuteness factors for squirrels. They're facts about me and my preferences. I like squirrels. Here's something though that's going to be really important to keep in mind as we sort of debate and talk about this stuff. Just because there's universal or near universal agreement doesn't make a fact objective. Here's an example. Poop is gross. The vast majority of people probably agree with a statement like that, but it's still a subjective fact, right? It will be true relative to somebody's preferences, right? Because that's what makes it either true or false. Similarly, just because people disagree about something doesn't mean it's not objective. It doesn't mean it is subjective. Disagreement does not necessarily indicate subjectivity, right? There's all kinds of people that disagree about climate change. There's people who think all the moon landings didn't happen. But those are still like objective facts about the world. There's people who think Earth is flat. But that doesn't change that from being an objective to a subjective claim. It's just objectively true that Earth is what? An oblate spheroid or whatever. So what we now can do is ask this question. This is what metaethics is all about. This statement right here, stealing is wrong, is that objectively true? So is it true regardless of what you think, what your preferences are? Is it subjectively true? Does it depend on a mind, on individual preferences? Or is it just something that's not even true at all? This is what metaethics is about. It's the status of moral statements like this. So we'll start getting into the actual views in the next video. I'll see you then.